What if I told you everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt was wrong? For centuries, we've seen a version of history that looks a certain way. Fair-skinned pharaohs, a civilization disconnected from the rest of Africa. But what if the real story is much, much different? Today, we diving deep into one of the most heated debates in history, the Black Egyptian theory. This isn't just about skin color. It's about reclaiming a narrative, challenging centuries of historical interpretation, and asking a fundamental question: who were the ancient Egyptians, really? The story we're usually told is that ancient Egypt was a Middle Eastern or Mediterranean civilization. But a powerful counter-narrative argues that ancient Egypt was fundamentally a Black, African civilization. Proponents of this theory point to a mountain of evidence that has been, they argue, either ignored or misinterpreted by mainstream academia. Let's start with the art. When you look closely at the tomb paintings, the statues, the hieroglyphs, what do you see? Many of these ancient depictions show people with dark skin, broad noses, and full lips, features commonly associated with Black Africans. From the powerful portraits of Queen Tiye, mother of Akhenaten, to the statues of pharaohs from the 25th dynasty, the so-called Nubian pharaohs, the visual evidence is compelling. Critics often dismiss this, saying the colors are symbolic, not literal. But when you see the consistency across thousands of years, you have to wonder. Then there's the scientific evidence. The pioneering Senegalese scholar, tryign Diop, conducted a groundbreaking test in 1974. He and his team examined the skin of mummies and found high levels of melanin, the pigment that gives skin its dark color. Diop's conclusion was stark and revolutionary. The ancient Egyptians were Black. His work ignited a firestorm, challenging the very foundations of Western Egyptology. He argued that ancient Egypt was not an anomaly, but the very cradle of Black civilization, a mother culture that influenced the rest of Africa and even Greece. Diop and other scholars also point to linguistics. They've found deep connections between the ancient Egyptian language and modern West African languages, particularly Wolof. They argue that the ancient Egyptians' own name for their land, Kemet, which translates to the Black Land, wasn't just about the fertile black soil of the Nile. They believe it was a self-description, meaning the land of the Black people. Of course, mainstream Egyptology pushes back, and hard. The dominant view today is that ancient Egypt was a multicultural melting pot. Situated at the crossroads of Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East, its population would have been diverse. They argue that trying to fit ancient people into modern racial categories like Black or white is anachronistic and unhelpful. They point to DNA studies, which have often shown genetic links to the Near East, though these studies are themselves controversial due to the challenges of extracting ancient DNA and the limited sample sizes. Mainstream scholars often accuse Afrocentric historians of having a political agenda, of trying to rewrite history to fit a particular narrative. But proponents fire back, saying that the Eurocentric view has dominated for centuries, and that it is the one with the political agenda, deliberately severing Egypt from its African roots to uphold colonial-era racial hierarchies. The debate is fierce, and it's not just confined to dusty academic journals. It's alive on the streets, in our communities, and all over the internet. Which brings us to a very modern and very viral example. Recently, popular streamer iShowSpeed took a trip to Egypt, and as he walked through the ancient temples and museums, he started asking a question that many people have asked before him. He saw statue after statue with a broken nose. He turned to his guide, perplexed, and asked why. The guide gave the standard explanation: tomb raiders, accidents, the passage of time. But Speed, like many others, was skeptical. He voiced the popular theory that the noses were intentionally broken off to hide the characteristically broad, African features of the pharaohs. Now, whether that's true is part of the larger debate. Egyptologists will tell you there's no grand conspiracy, that noses are simply the most fragile part of a statue. But the fact that this question keeps coming up, from scholars to streamers, shows a deep-seated public curiosity and a distrust of the official story. It highlights a feeling that something is being hidden, that the faces of these ancient kings and queens have been deliberately altered to fit a different narrative. Speed's viral moment wasn't just a funny clip. It was a reflection of a century-old question bursting into the mainstream consciousness of a new generation. It's the visual symbol of the entire controversy. a broken history, a contested identity. So why does this all matter so much? Why is this more than just an academic argument? Because the identity of ancient Egypt is tied to the identity of Africa itself. For centuries, the history of Africa was told as a story of darkness and savagery, only discovered and civilized by Europeans. The towering achievements of Egypt, its mathematics, its architecture, its philosophy, its art, were sectioned off, treated as separate from the rest of the continent. If Egypt was indeed a black civilization, it completely shatters that colonial narrative. It means that one of the greatest civilizations in human history was a product of black ingenuity. Reclaiming Egypt as African is an act of historical justice. It's about restoring a stolen legacy and empowering a sense of pride and identity. It's a core part of the decolonization of our minds and our history books. It challenges us to look at the entire continent of Africa with new eyes, not as a place without history, but as the very source of it. This debate forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how history is written and for whom. It shows that history is not a static collection of facts, but a battlefield of interpretations, where power and politics have always played a role. The Black Egyptian theory challenges the authority of traditional institutions and asks us to be more critical consumers of the stories we are told. It encourages us to look at the primary sources ourselves, to question the consensus, and to listen to the voices that have been silenced for far too long. So where does that leave us? On one side, you have a wealth of evidence from art, science, and linguistics, championed by Afrocentric scholars who see a clear, undeniable Black African identity for ancient Egypt. On the other, you have mainstream Egyptology, which argues for a more diverse, mixed population and dismisses the Black Egyptian theory as a politically motivated oversimplification. They warn against applying modern racial labels to the ancient world. The truth is, we may never have a definitive, universally accepted answer. The sands of time have buried much, and what remains is open to interpretation. But the debate itself is incredibly valuable. It has forced a re-evaluation of old assumptions and opened the door for new perspectives. It has brought African scholarship to the forefront and challenged the Eurocentric bias that has long dominated the field. So, the next time you see a picture of a pharaoh or a documentary about the pyramids, ask yourself, what story is being told and what story is being left out? Because the controversy over ancient Egypt isn't just about the past. It's about our present, our identity, and who has the power to define our future by controlling our past. The question isn't just who were the ancient Egyptians. It's also who gets to write history. And what do you think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into history, make sure to like and subscribe for more.